As the sun sets, the sky is filled with a stunning array of colours. Golden yellows blend into deep oranges and pinks. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create your own sunset painting using oil paints. I'll walk you through how to mix the colours to achieve that quality of light you get at golden hour, as well as demonstrate techniques for how to layer and blend the paint to create the appearance of sea foam, distant ripples, and the barrel of the wave. I'll first quickly show you the supplies I've used for today's video and talk about the sponsor, which is the oil paint brand that I've used. Firstly, I used a wooden panel for painting, but you can use any surface you want, like canvas or paper. I mainly use 3 brushes: a larger Filbert brush for filling in backgrounds, a softer liner brush for the details, and a goat mop brush for blending. I use a palette for mixing and some linseed oil as a medium to make the paint more fluid. The oil paint brand I'm using is Cranfield oil paints. I've really enjoyed using their paints because they're really good quality. They are professional, artist-grade oil paints, and the way I describe them is that they're incredibly vibrant and buttery. You can see how luminous the colours are on the palette, and you'll see when I'm mixing how a tiny bit of paint goes a really long way, just due to the high pigment content. They act almost like concentrates in this way. So I'll put a link in the description to Cranfield colours so you can check them out. The colours I'm using from Cranfield are Titanium White, Yellow Lake Bright, Yellow Lake, Naphthol Red, Magenta, Phthalo Blue, and Burnt Umber. I find that the colours Phthalo Blue and Yellow Lake Bright are especially good for mixing seascape tones. From these 2 colours you can mix the purest turquoises and teals. I chose to use a split primary palette because it enables me to mix a large range of tones from just a few tubes. But you can use any colours that you have to create the painting as long as you have versions of the primaries. In terms of the composition, I'm working on a 9x12 inch panel that I've split in half at the horizon. Starting by mixing the colours for the sky. This is a pastel coloured sunset, so we'll need quite a bit of titanium white for the mixes. For the sky gradient, we'll mix a light yellow transitioning into a light orange. First, I'm making a mix of light orange with titanium white, then a small amount of Naphthol red and Yellow Lake. The yellow colour that this colour will transition into is titanium white, then a smaller amount of Naphthol red compared to the Yellow Lake. I also create a lighter and more muted tone that will go at the top of the canvas, which is a mix of more titanium white with a little Yellow Lake, Naphthol red, and a tiny bit of burnt umber. Then finally, I'm mixing a light grey tone for the cloud, which is titanium white, phthalo blue, burnt umber, and magenta. I mix this with some of the orange tone that's already on the palette. I decided that I needed the cloud at the top to be a little bit more muted in tone, so I mixed the light yellow with the grey cloud colour. I'm starting by painting a strip of the light muted tone at the top of the canvas to create the impression of an altostratus cloud blocking the light from the sun. This creates a nice composition in the sky section because the muted tones will contrast with the light saturated oranges and yellows. The next colour I'm laying down is the pale orange. I've mixed some of the orange on the palette with the lighter muted tone to create a transitional shade. I'll be painting with the wet on wet technique for the whole painting so that the colours blend into one another to create a soft appearance in the sky and water. I find that mixing transitional shades on the palette is the best way to achieve a smooth gradient in the painting. Then I'll also use a blending brush to smooth out the transitional tones and blend them together. I've used the orange tone that I mixed to map out the edge of where the cloud on the horizon will be. The sky transitions from orange on the right to a bright yellow in the middle, then muted lighter yellow at the top. Then, when I'm blending lightly across the whole of the sky area with my goat mop brush, taking care not to overblend. The next step is to paint the straightest cloud that's sitting on the horizon with the medium grey colour that I mixed earlier. I'm using a Filbert brush to block in the shapes. The round edge of the brush is helping to create soft edges where the cloud meets the sky, which gives it a realistic look. To create the horizon line, you could use masking tape to achieve a perfectly straight line, or just carefully paint along the edge of it. At the top of the canvas, I'm going to paint some smaller, darker clouds to unify the top and the bottom of the sky, so I'm using the medium grey cloud colour and the edge of my Filbert brush again to create the organic cloud shapes. To create a harmonious soft appearance, I'm very lightly blending all the cloud shapes out so that the edges blur into the sky. Now we'll start working on the tones of the ocean. The distant water is reflecting the orange and yellow light of the sky. However, the colours of the water appear darker and more muted compared to the sky. So, for the ocean colour, I'm mixing Yellow Lake, a hint of Naphthol red with quite a bit of titanium white, To create more harmonious tones, I often use colours that I already have mixed on the palette, so I'm using a bit of the cloud grey to darken the mix and make it appear more muted in tone. You can add a touch more blue and burnt umber if you need to tone down the colour even more. I'm going to paint the ripples of the water while this yellowish base colour is still wet, so that the edges of the waves blend in. The colours I'm mixing for the distant ripples are phthalo blue and burnt umber, then some of the muted yellow tone I use for the base coat to lighten and neutralise the mix further in a harmonious way. To paint the ripples, I'm using a rigger brush made from soft bristles that taper to a point. I've also mixed in a little bit of linseed oil to the paint to make it more fluid, which makes painting small details like this easier. Then I'm taking some time to create organic looking lines that are slightly thicker in the middle compared to the edges. The distant ripples are smaller and thinner, then the ones nearer the viewer are thicker in appearance. Some of the ripples are lighter in appearance than others. For this, I'll add some of the base yellow colour to the mix. What makes the ripples appear more realistic is variety in their appearance to some extent, in the thickness and length of the ripples and the way that they're spaced out. Repetition is key here, as that's what brings a sense of rhythm to the piece. To paint the wave, I've used the same colour mix that I made for the distant ripples, but added some bright yellow to make it appear more turquoise in tone. The outer edge is slightly darker compared to the curve of the wave, as this is where the light is shining through it. Where the wave curves in towards the shore, the sun that's being sucked up from the ocean shore is creating opacity in the wave and blocking the light. So I'll paint this with a darker green colour, which is burnt umber, phthalo blue and yellow lake bright. You can see when we start to combine the tones how the shape of the wave comes together. The foam colour is a light blue grey tone, so for this we'll mix phthalo blue, burnt umber and titanium white. I'm going to use more phthalo blue than burnt umber to achieve this cool bluish tone of the mid-grey. At this blocked in stage, I'm also going to darken the blue mix with more burnt umber and phthalo blue to create the shadows in the foam. The wet sand at the bottom of the painting is also reflecting the orange and yellow tones of the sky, so I'm mixing the sky tones with some extra burnt umber to make the pastel sand colour. It transitions from a yellowish brown to an orange brown, reflecting the sky hues. So now that we've blocked in the base colours for the whole entire painting and detailed some of the distant ripples, all we have left to do is create the details on the wave. There are quite a lot of subtle variations in tones and values on the wave, so I'm going to start with a fresh palette so that I can mix all the transitional shades that I need. As well as adding details to the wave, I'm also going to be increasing the contrast in values. The contrasted values will make the wave appear emphasised and as the focal point of the piece. I'm going in with a deeper teal mix, which is made from titanium white, phthalo blue, burnt umber, yellow lake bright and a tiny bit of magenta. I'm using this colour for where the ripples in the wave are casting a slight shadow. Then I'm mixing some variations of this teal tone, a lighter version, a darker version, and a more muted version, and a deeper green tone for the middle of the wave. I've made the wave slightly darker to make it stand out more with the teal colour. Then I'm just using a rigger brush with the lighter teal tone to create highlights on the wave. I want to also deepen the shadows on the sea foam. For that I'm mixing a darker grey blue colour than I did before, with phthalo blue, titanium white, burnt umber and a hint of magenta. I'm using a larger brush to brush over where the shadows will be. I'm still being quite abstract with the shapes that I'm making at this point, as I've not started the final layer of the painting yet. Now I think the values on the wave are looking a bit more accurate. Now I'm adding some extra details using the foam shade and the deeper foam shade. Then I've also added a bit of white to the colour to make a foam highlight shade. I'm interchanging these three tones to add definition to the foam at the front. The shapes of the foam appear to curve along the shore, making the composition appear rhythmic and dynamic. Now we can paint the final details, adding definition to the wave and foam. I'm going in with a small brush and light grey paint to emphasise some of the highlights in the foam along the barrel where it's catching the light. I think that creating more contrast in the wave really brought the piece together, adding emphasis and variety. The next step will be leaving it to dry and then varnishing. And thank you so much for joining this lesson with me. I hope you enjoyed painting an ocean sunset with oils. If you did, it would really help me out if you gave the video a like. Till next time.